A beautiful soul never argues, it simply vanishes. Charlie Chaplin once revealed this quiet truth, a line that strikes like a whisper, yet carries the force of thunder. In a world built on constant noise, where people shout opinions, defend egos, and sharpen words into weapons, what power does silence hold? What does it mean when a person chooses to vanish instead of engage? When they step away without resentment, without bitterness, leaving only the faint echo of their presence. It is not weakness. It is not surrender. It is the highest form of strength, the wisdom of conserving one's spirit rather than wasting it on battles that strip away dignity. Imagine a crowded marketplace, voices clashing in endless debate. In the center, one figure stands calm, unshaken, eyes not on the chaos, but beyond it. That figure is the archetype of the beautiful soul, the one who knows that validation from conflict is fleeting, but self-respect carved in silence is eternal. Psychology tells us that arguments rarely change hearts. They more often solidify walls. Ego defends itself with fire, but empathy dissolves it with water. And when empathy senses its absence, silence becomes the shield. You have met such people before, those who do not fight to prove they are right, because their worth does not live in another's approval. Their departure teaches more than their words ever could. Think about the times you have felt the urge to argue, to defend yourself with 100 reasons, to carve your truth into stone for others to see. Did it bring peace, or did it leave you drained, restless, unsatisfied? The human heart craves recognition, but it also knows exhaustion. This is where Chaplin's wisdom cuts deep. A beautiful soul is not one that wins battles, but one that refuses to fight them when the cost is too high. To vanish is not escape, it is transcendence. It is stepping outside the storm, so the storm no longer consumes you. You too have this power. Every person does. It is the decision to let your silence speak louder than any defense could ever roar. In mythology, sages are often portrayed as wanderers. They do not linger in palaces of argument or courts of pride. They vanish into mountains, into forests, into quiet roads where their essence cannot be corrupted by noise. The archetype here is timeless, the wise one, the figure who sees through the illusion of control. For to argue endlessly is to cling, to bind yourself to chains forged by the need to win. The wise one cuts the chains not with force, but with absence. What is left behind is mystery, and in mystery, respect is born. You remember those who vanish with dignity, more than those who shouted until their throats broke. There is also an emotional psychology in this vanishing. When one steps away, they force reflection. The absence becomes a mirror. Those who expected a fight are left staring into silence. And silence, unlike words, cannot be twisted. Silence holds power because it gives the mind no choice but to face itself. Have you noticed? The quiet often lingers longer than the noise. A vanishing soul leaves behind not anger, but questions. Questions that echo louder than any accusation. This is why vanishing is not cowardice. It is a quiet revolution, a message written in invisible ink across the consciousness of those left behind. But here lies the challenge. Society conditions us to equate silence with weakness. We are told to speak up, to defend, to never back down. Yet psychology shows us that true resilience often wears the mask of detachment. To walk away is not to lose it, is to redefine the game entirely. It is to refuse to be dragged into a war of egos that leaves both sides wounded. And perhaps this is the essence of Chaplin's insight, that the most beautiful souls are not seen in the heat of combat, but felt in the serenity of their absence. You will know them because they carry no scars of pointless battles. Their scars, if any, come from journeys into themselves. And maybe this is the moment for you to ask yourself, how many battles are you fighting that do not deserve you? How many arguments pull you into the dust when your spirit longs for the sky? What would happen if you simply vanished from them? Not with bitterness, not with anger, but with grace. Would the world collapse? Or would you discover, perhaps for the first time, that silence is its own victory? These are not small questions. They are the foundations of peace, the pillars of self-worth. Because in the end, the most beautiful soul is the one that has nothing to prove, nothing to defend, nothing to lose. It is already whole. The soul that vanishes leaves behind a space, a silence that echoes louder than any argument ever could. That space unsettles those who thrive on conflict, because without resistance, their fire loses oxygen. In psychology, this is known as the withdrawal of reinforcement. When a behavior is no longer rewarded with attention, it withers. The beautiful soul understands this instinctively. Instead of feeding another's hunger for domination, it simply disappears, and in that disappearance lies a profound lesson. Not everything requires your energy. Not every provocation deserves your presence. To vanish is to reclaim sovereignty over your own spirit. Consider the archetype of the peacemaker, not the passive appeaser, but the one whose strength lies in restraint. This figure appears across cultures, from the monk in the monastery to the elder who sits in silence while others quarrel around him. He knows that arguing with a fool makes both look foolish, and that wisdom needs no audience. His very stillness becomes a mirror, reflecting the futility of noise. And yet, this archetype is not about avoiding conflict out of fear. It is about transcending the need for validation through conflict. It is about rising above the battlefield, so the war cannot touch you. Think of the last time someone tried to draw you into an argument. Perhaps it was over pride, perhaps over misunderstanding, perhaps over something so small it now feels almost absurd. Your heart raced, your mind burned with counter-arguments, every word sharpened like a blade waiting to strike. But had you stepped away, had you chosen silence, would that fire have consumed you? Or would it have burned out on its own, leaving only ashes in the other's hands? When you walk away, you turn conflict into solitude, and solitude becomes your strength. You discover that you are not defined by winning, but by walking with dignity. Emotionally, the choice to vanish is an act of self-preservation. It is choosing to protect the fragile inner space where peace lives. Psychological studies show that constant argumentation floods the body with stress, hormones, adrenaline, cortisol, keeping the nervous system in a state of perpetual combat. Over time, this erodes health, clarity, even joy. The beautiful soul chooses differently. By stepping away, it allows the body and mind to return to equilibrium. It chooses serenity over victory, longevity over the fleeting satisfaction of being right. To vanish is to say, my health, my peace, my soul are worth more than your noise. And yet, vanishing is not always understood. To those who crave control, it feels like abandonment. To those who thrive on attention, it feels like rejection. They will say you are cold, detached, uncaring, but you know the truth. It takes more love for oneself, and often more love for humanity, to refuse to perpetuate cycles of harm. You are not abandoning the world when you vanish from argument. You are reminding it that true love is not found in proving points, but in preserving essence. This is why sages, poets, and visionaries so often walked away from courts, debates, and conflicts. They were not weak, but too strong to be entangled. There is a paradox in vanishing. Though it appears as disappearance, it creates a presence more powerful than words. Absence awakens longing, reflection, curiosity. The human mind is wired to notice what is missing more than what is present. In your silence, you become unforgettable. In your absence, you speak volumes. Those left behind cannot help but question themselves. Why did they not fight? Why did they not stay? Was I unworthy of their words? And in those questions lies the seed of transformation. For silence becomes the teacher where argument never could. The archetype of the vanishing soul is closely tied to the healer. The healer knows that wounds are not mended by fire, but by space, time, and quiet. To vanish is to allow space for healing, both for oneself and for others. When you stop fueling the flames, the fire dies, and in the coolness that follows, growth becomes possible. Think of rivers carving valleys, not with force, but with persistence, with quiet flow. The healer archetype flows this way, vanishing from the battlefield, but returning as a current that shapes mountains. You, too, carry this within you. The power to vanish, not to abandon, but to heal. And so, every time you resist the pull of an argument, every time you choose silence instead of shouting, every time you walk away with grace instead of claws, you align yourself with this archetype. You rise above the noise into clarity. You become the reminder that peace is possible, that dignity is not negotiable, and that vanishing is sometimes the most eloquent way of speaking. The beautiful soul never argues, not because it cannot, but because it knows it does not need to. Its truth is not diminished by silence, it is magnified. The vanishing soul is often mistaken for weakness, yet in truth, it carries the same energy as the warrior who lays down his sword, not because he cannot fight, but because he sees the futility of endless battle. In mythology, this archetype emerges again and again. The hermit who retreats into the mountains, the saint who answers insult with silence, the philosopher who leaves the marketplace mid-debate. Their absence does not signify defeat. It signifies a refusal to be defined by conflict. To vanish is to choose the higher battlefield, the one within where the only opponent is one's own ego. The ego always demands to be right. It craves applause, recognition, and proof that it cannot be diminished. Arguments are its playground. Every raised voice, every cutting remark, every desperate defense becomes fuel for its fire. But the beautiful soul sees the trap. It knows that ego wins no true victories. It only deepens wounds, both given and received. To step away, then, is to starve the ego. It is to unmask its hunger and say, "You will not feed on me." In silence, you disarm it completely. And when the ego is silenced, what remains is something far more authentic, your essence, untouched by noise. There is also a profound psychology in the act of walking away. Research in behavioral science reveals that disengagement from toxic patterns not only preserves mental health, but also redefines power. When you refuse to engage, you assert control over the only realm you truly possess: your energy, your attention, your peace. In that moment, you are no longer reacting to the world, you are shaping your own. Think of it. Every time you choose silence over argument, you are training your mind to anchor in peace rather than chaos. You are building resilience, not through dominance, but through discipline. Picture a storm raging across the sea, waves colliding with fury, winds howling in defiance. And yet, deep beneath the surface, the ocean is calm, undisturbed by the chaos above. The vanishing soul is that depth. It refuses to rise with every gust of wind, refuses to crash with every provocation. It sinks into stillness where storms cannot reach. That stillness is not apathy, it is mastery. You, too, have this depth within you, though the world tries to pull you upward into the noise. Each time you vanish from conflict, you return to that depth, reclaiming the calm that is your birthright. It is also worth seeing how vanishing transforms relationships. The one who argues seeks dominance, not connection. Words become weapons, and the battlefield replaces the bridge. But when you step away, you create a void that reveals the truth of the relationship. If love is real, it will survive without argument. If respect exists, it will grow stronger in silence. And if both are absent, your vanishing uncovers it without you needing to prove anything. Walking away, then, is not abandonment, it is revelation. It exposes what cannot be said with words, and in that exposure, it grants clarity. The archetype of the vanishing soul also touches the seeker, the figure who is not satisfied with surface battles but longs for deeper truths. This seeker knows that every argument keeps the soul chained to the shallow ground of pride. By vanishing, the seeker moves toward higher ground, where peace and understanding live. Such souls are often misunderstood in their time. They are called detached, aloof, even cold. But in truth, they are simply searching for what lies beyond the noise. History remembers them not as cowards, but as visionaries, their silence echoing louder than the arguments that once surrounded them. Consider, too, the emotional liberation that comes with this archetype. When you no longer feel compelled to defend every opinion, justify every choice, or fight every provocation, a great weight falls away. Your spirit, once bound by the need to be understood, breathes freely. You no longer live as a prisoner of perception, but as a sovereign of your own peace. And in this freedom, you begin to see the beauty in vanishing, not as retreat, but as rebirth. Each silence becomes a seed planted in the soil of your own becoming, watered not by argument, but by self-respect. So, when Chaplin said, "A beautiful soul never argues," he did not glorify weakness. He unveiled the deepest form of strength, the power to walk away, to vanish, to let silence carry the weight of truth. It is the choice that transforms battles into lessons, noise into clarity, absence into presence. And you, hearing these words now, carry that same power. The question is not whether you can argue, but whether you will choose not to. For the soul that vanishes does not disappear into nothingness. It rises into everything. There is a haunting beauty in the vanishing of a soul that refuses to argue. It does not slam doors. It does not hurl words into the air like daggers. It simply fades, like a star retreating into dawn. That quiet departure becomes a language of its own, one that transcends speech and pierces deeper than debate ever could. The archetype here is the mystic, the one who understands that the most profound truths are not shouted, but whispered, not argued, but lived. The mystic knows that silence has gravity, and in that gravity lies the power to transform hearts. When you watch someone step away from conflict, something stirs within you. You may feel unsettled, even abandoned, but later you realize the weight of their silence. The human psyche is not comfortable with absence. It clings to presence, even if that presence comes through argument. Silence leaves no handholds. It forces the other to confront themselves, to wrestle with their own conscience. And herein lies the quiet genius of vanishing. It turns the battlefield inward. The one left behind is no longer fighting you. They are fighting themselves. Imagine the world as a theater where countless actors shout for attention, each voice competing for dominance. Amid the noise, one figure steps off the stage, leaving the spotlight empty. Suddenly, the absence becomes the focus. The audience wonders, why did they leave? What truth was too sacred for noise? This is the paradox of vanishing. It draws more attention than presence. In psychological terms, it is scarcity that sharpens perception. When something is no longer available, its value grows. The vanishing soul teaches without speaking that dignity cannot be debated and that truth does not require performance. There is also a hidden tenderness in this act. To walk away is to protect not only yourself, but also the other. Arguments wound, and words once spoken can never be recalled. They scar the memory, echoing long after the battle ends. By vanishing, the beautiful soul spares both sides this destruction. It chooses compassion over conquest, mercy over victory. The healer archetype resurfaces here, for vanishing is not an act of indifference, but of care. A refusal to inflict pain that will outlast the moment. You may not see it this way in the heat of conflict, but later, when the fire cools, you will recognize the mercy in their silence. Consider, too, how vanishing reshapes self-worth. So often, people measure their value through arguments won, through applause received, through the fragile currency of validation. But the soul that vanishes proves that worth is intrinsic, untouchable, beyond negotiation. This is a profound psychological freedom, to know that your dignity is not subject to another's approval. By walking away, you are declaring that your peace is not for sale, your essence not up for debate. The world may push, provoke, tempt you into its endless theater of noise, but you carry within you the quiet authority of silence. That authority cannot be broken. The archetype of the sage appears here, the one who sees through illusion. The sage knows that victory in argument is temporary, but mastery of self is eternal. When you vanish from conflict, you align with this wisdom. You begin to see arguments for what they often are, distractions from deeper truths, games of pride disguised as battles for justice. The sage chooses a different path, walking away not out of fear, but out of clarity. His silence is not empty. It is full of meaning, a living testimony that not all truths must be spoken. There is, of course, loneliness in this vanishing. To step away is to separate yourself from the noise of the crowd, to inhabit a space that few dare to enter. Silence can feel isolating, especially when the world equates noise with relevance. But it is in this loneliness that the soul discovers its true strength. You begin to realize that the quiet is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. It is the room where your spirit breathes, where you can hear the subtler voices of intuition, creativity, and peace. And when you return to the world, you do so not as a participant in its chaos, but as a bearer of calm. So, when a soul vanishes, it does not disappear, it expands. It leaves the narrow confines of argument and rises into the vastness of serenity. You may not see it, but you will feel it, like a fragrance lingering in the air long after the flower has gone. And if you learn to embody this, you too become unforgettable, not because you shouted the loudest, but because you walked away when noise had nothing left to teach you. The vanishing of a beautiful soul is not an ending, but a beginning, a quiet metamorphosis that transforms conflict into clarity. When a soul refuses to argue, it withdraws into a sacred stillness where growth becomes possible. This stillness is not empty, it is a womb of transformation. Psychologists describe it as emotional detachment, but it is more than that. It is the conscious act of rising above reaction, of choosing to be guided not by impulse, but by wisdom. In this space, the soul reclaims its energy, nourishes its essence, and emerges stronger, unburdened by the weight of needless battles. The archetype that emerges here is the reborn wanderer, the one who steps away not only from conflict, but from the illusions that conflict sustains. The wanderer seeks not to conquer others, but to explore the landscape of the self. Each time the soul vanishes from noise, it sets out on a journey inward, and in that journey lies the discovery that the need to prove oneself was never about truth, it was about fear. Fear of being unseen, unheard, unloved. By walking away, the wanderer confronts this fear and transforms it into liberation. Think of the times you have walked away in silence. At first, it felt like loss, like surrender, like defeat. Yet over time, that silence became fertile. It gave you space to breathe, to see the situation with new eyes, to feel your own strength in a way that words could never provide. Silence becomes a mirror, showing you not what others believe about you, but what you truly are. And that reflection is priceless, for it reveals that your worth was never dependent on argument in the first place. In relationships, this kind of vanishing carries deep power. It teaches that love is not found in endless justifications, but in presence, respect, and trust. The one who vanishes does not disappear from love, but from the battles that poison it. Silence, then, becomes an act of faith. Faith that love strong enough will endure without conflict, and that if it does not, it was never love at all. You may think of this as abandonment, but in truth, it is alignment. By stepping away, You align with your deeper self, with values that cannot be compromised for the sake of winning. There is a quiet rebellion in this choice. Society urges you to fight, to prove, to never back down. But the vanishing soul defies this conditioning. It shows that true power lies not in domination, but in detachment. By refusing to engage, you rewrite the rules of the game. You remind the world that peace is not weakness, and that serenity is not surrender. This rebellion is subtle, but it is transformative. Over time, it shifts the balance of power from those who scream the loudest to those who remain unshaken. Emotionally, this act of vanishing also teaches resilience. You learn that you can endure misunderstanding, rejection, even false accusation without needing to fight back. This is one of the highest forms of psychological freedom, to be at peace even when others cannot see your truth. The soul that vanishes is no longer bound by the fragile threads of external validation. It carries within itself the quiet certainty of its worth. And once you taste that freedom, you realize that no argument in the world is worth losing it. The archetype of the phoenix rises here, the bird that burns away in silence, only to be reborn from its ashes. To vanish is to let the old self die, the self that needed to win, the self that sought applause, the self enslaved to ego. From the silence, a new self emerges, lighter, freer, more luminous. This rebirth is not loud. It does not announce itself with fanfare. It glows quietly, like dawn creeping across the horizon. And just as dawn does not argue with the night, the reborn soul does not argue with those who misunderstand. It simply shines. And in that shining, it transforms everything it touches. And so, vanishing is not an escape, but a return to peace, to clarity, to wholeness. The soul that walks away is not weaker for leaving. It is stronger for refusing to stay bound to illusions. Its silence is not absence, but presence of a higher order, a presence that whispers to those willing to hear. There is a better way, a freer path, a life beyond the endless noise. The soul that vanishes does not disappear, it awakens.